Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another Ed Talks podcast. And I'm delighted to have with me this time someone who, if you're in the industry, you may be beginning to hear about. And if you haven't, you certainly will. A gentleman called Matt Gilpin, who is the CEO and founder, I think, of a company called Sprift. That's S-P-R-I-F-T. Now, briefly, I'll just tell you what I know about Sprift and why I think they're an interesting company. Everybody in the estate agency industry, actually, whether you're a buyer or a seller or an estate agent, property manager, whatever it is, actually, wanting to know what's going on around you in your area is incredibly important. And there are so many indices out there that tell you that prices are going up, down, round and about, whatever. Lots of things telling you how many properties there are on the market, lots of listings. What's very, very difficult to find out is specific detail about those properties. And most estate agents would love to know exactly what's on the market in their area, how long it's been on the market for, exactly what it's on the market for, whether the price has been reduced. And not only that, but the detail appertaining to that specific property. As I said, there's lots of generalised data out there, but what there isn't is a lot of specific data about 36 Acacia Avenue. And I think that what Sprift are doing is pulling lots of that together and putting it in one place. Is that a fair description of what you're doing, Matt?
It is, yes. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, yes. Yeah.
Interesting to hear all sorts of things from you. I mean, obviously, how did you find your way into this area? Have you always been a data-driven details person?
No, I can't say I've. I'm a data geek or nerd. I've been in property investment and development since 20 years now, since late 90s. And even though I've transacted many properties, I got to the point where I'm thinking I've used this solicitor hundreds of times on many transactions and I'm still not getting the service I require. I'm still not getting the transactions are taking too long. And why is that? What's that being blamed on? And quite often it was, there's this bit of information missing, or searches are taking too long to come back. And so I started then thinking about everything that I do as an investor or developer in my day-to-day business and where I'm going to find information right from the outset when I'm first looking at a property. And quite often, your first route in is through the portals, and then from there you'll then want to go and look at maybe a local authority website. You might look at the VOA website. You might look at want to try and find the property accurately on Google Street View. And this information was just cast to the four winds of the internet. So I thought, it would be not only for my own benefit, but the benefit of all, to start trying to bring that into one place. The data that you actually need to assess whether I want to buy that property, sell it, invest in it, finance it, develop it, whatever. And I thought it would be at outset. I thought, this would be quite easy, and I can't imagine why nobody's done this before. And we're now almost 3 years in, and we're still cutting our teeth on it, but we've made a good headway into that. And so that's really how I got into it.
Well, one of the good things, congratulations, you've been around for 3 years, as you said.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the percentages of startups that don't make it that distance, but I've been in the industry a very long time, and when I heard what you were saying, it instantly rang true, what you were trying to do. And actually, to me, in my intro, I completely missed out there the important thing which you just alluded to, which is how long transactions take. And how that's actually getting worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worse now, a lot worse now than it was 10 years ago, which is completely ridiculous and completely counterintuitive, given that supposedly we've had an explosion in information technology.
Exactly, yeah.
And I don't know what that says about the two elements that tend to make up the transaction. Well, there are three elements, as we know. One is financing, which is slow, but perhaps getting a little bit better, but still very slow. Two is the legal process, and the legal process tends to inform the mortgage process sometimes because the mortgage companies want to know everything they can do about the property. So that definitely is one of the slowing factors, and estate agency itself. And we know that certainly the conveyancing side and the estate agency side is pretty resistant to change. There's a certain element of turkeys voting for Christmas for it.
Right.
But would you agree that the end game is where a buyer can go into a room, a room on the internet where all the information about a property is there. So after they've seen it, checked out, they like it, they can push a button and buy it. Surely that's got to be the end game, hasn't it?
Exactly. And I think that we're talking to agents all the time, and they're very open to that, and it's a long time now since an agent turned around and said to us that, I don't know about sharing this information up front. I'd rather a buyer was committed to the property, maybe had paid searches or a survey fee, and then before they find out something that might not be ideal and may have otherwise deterred them from buying the property, and by then, I'll just sort of, steer it on through. Nowadays, agents are, they're aware of that this data's out there. They're aware that just everything is online. Everything's so much more transparent. And for my mind, the most forward-thinking agents are the ones that are really seeking to actually give that information up front so that a quicker buying or not buying decision can be made. And then that can also then act by having key facts at first inquiry for buyers and getting a vendor sale ready. It's a lot better handover to a conveyancer, which common sense would dictate can then start to reduce transaction times.
So it's like a sort of passport, really, for the property. It's like a sort of vault of information for the property.
Exactly, yeah. It's many people have called it many things, property passport, property logbook. But in effect, yes, we have an online digital dashboard for any property in the UK, which pulls together information that... and it's a long time since it's been based solely on my vision. It's very much been co-created with our estate agent, landlord, developer users, and now some conveyancers are using it. So it's the information that they're saying that, look, this is what I need to know, even before when I'm looking to do my pre-valuation research, right the way through to what I want to be presenting to buyers, and then what I want to hand over to. So
what percentage would you say of the information that is required to enable a sale to be made quickly? What percentage do you think is now available via a Sprift type?
It varies based on a local authority. So when I very naively first started scoping out Sprift, I thought, okay, well, I can go to Land Registry and you can download a data set from them, and then I can look at Google Maps, and then there was this fantastic thing called data.gov.uk, and I thought, well, every local authority's there with all their data. And as soon as we started delving into that, we realised there's just massive holes in it. So there are certain local authorities now where the information we're pulling from them live is good enough to create a live search. There's other local authorities that still probably transacting in paper and microfiche. So there is a variance there. We, on the platform, certainly where we have users in particular areas, local authority or postcode areas, are trying very hard to get over 90% of completeness of data there. And in fact, at the moment, we're going through a massive just cleanse and match of all data to make sure as much as possible is there. But yeah, there are issues at local authority level. That said, now, because we've done a lot of work with local authorities and actually sent some of our guys into local authorities to help them with their data composition, we're able to get.
So you'd say that's where the main sort of blockage is yes. in the variance in what local authorities produce.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, in terms of data that your detail level of data can go right down to sort of tree preservation orders
yes.
and everything on it. So, one of the things that obviously is going to be to people's advantage when they're keeping up their logbook, vault, passport, whatever it is the ability to keep up what they do to the property.
Yes.
So, terrible example, the night before last, I spent most of the night behaving like the Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. I could hear water dripping, worked out what it was, went up, found that there was a hole in a pipe. I had to stick my finger in it and literally sit there pretty much all night until the plumber came the next morning, because otherwise... and so I'm going to have to put in I'm going to have to sort out my plumbing system. So it would be great to do that and then update it on a system so that everyone's... Is that a part of what you're doing?
Yes, exactly.
Giving owners the ability to update in real time?
Exactly. And we're able to show now, our metrics are showing that actually we can help reduce transaction times and also help vendors and their agents achieve a high percentage of asking price by not only presenting all that kind of mandatory open data that's out there that people want to see, but also that sort of practical information. And it was explained to me very early on because I'm not from a tech background, and it's been a very steep learning curve over the last 3 years, but a very enjoyable one too. But it was explained to me very early on in this process that if all I was going to go and do was put out an online pigeonhole system and expect people to pre-populate my reports, it was never going to happen. We can see in our our lifeline, our timeline, where this, if you like, the sort of the watershed moment was, where because we were going out so data rich and presenting information to agents and vendors, people started to take us seriously, and then they engaged with it, and then we have a series of messages that go out to from the agent, go out to the vendor, which just nurtures them into either adding in data or information or facts or getting warranties or certificates and stuff like that together that's going to be requested at some point in the sale anyway, and also the practical information. So let's just give us a list of and this is the most basic thing we get them to do, and they do this wholeheartedly. Just give us a list of maybe a dozen or so professionals, tradespeople, suppliers that have had a relationship with your property. It's very easy to do. People can do it straight out of their phones, out of their contact books and their phones. And that's information that a buyer perceives great value and great comfort in.
Honestly, Matt, I think that's... I mean, I've been out talking to one or two people who are doing this at a very, very high-end concierge level.
Yes.
And they consider it's part of what they would describe as a premium service, And actually, whilst I think that's a great idea, and there will be some very wealthy people who really just need to have someone who can go and sort stuff out, to be able to have all that information to hand is, I think, absolutely vital. I mean, I think it's definitely the next step. I mean, in terms of the agents, I mean, you must have talked to hundreds and hundreds of agents now.
Indeed, yeah.
I mean, if you were to try and put a percentage, or without naming any names, obviously, do you feel that the people who are most responsive to what you're talking about are the bigger groups, the independent guys? How would you characterise the take-up?
It's really across the board, and I have been asked that before. And so in our early days, certain agents would say, "Oh, you're for more for the bigger chains," or "No, you're more for the independent," or "You're more for a premium brand." And we find that actually it's just we've got from big networks right the way down to one-man bands. Users right the way across the board. I think it's down to the individual agent. I mean, I get that agents have just been hammered now for. When did I see the first article? Probably at least a couple of years ago about the real estate industry must engage with tech to survive, and there's a myriad of articles out there about that. And now there are a number of bodies, groups, advisory committees coming together to actually say, yeah, okay, we know that you've been told that for a long period of time, but which ones actually should you engage with? And so you can. I think we're past the stage of just the early tech adopters looking at us now, and it's more people looking at, okay, well, there is this tech out there. Our biggest thing actually that we get is that we save time. We're saving the agent time. They're not having to go and try and find this information themselves, or being asked a question and then, I've got to go off and find that, or have somebody in the office that, it could be taking, half a day for, say, a junior neg to be running around trying to find this information. So our biggest thing, the biggest piece of feedback we get is that we're saving time.
Yeah, well, time is, I mean, the chances of a deal falling through are in direct proportion to how long it's on the market, and how long the deal takes.
Yes,
so the longer the deal takes, the more chance there is of it falling through. So, and what a lot of agents understand is that it's vital before you even put a property on the market to have as much data as possible ready for it, and if they can go and get all that information from one point for a relatively nominal sum, so that it's just there straight away, what is not to like? Yeah. And I think that's I mean, I'm delighted that in this entire conversation you haven't used the word disrupt or revolutionise, because it's just that there are so many. I get probably 2 or 3 emails a day from people asking for help or advice. And every time they start and they say, this is, our system is going to revolutionise the way estate agents do business. And the first thing I do is write back and say, can you just do that again, please? But just you take out all the hyperbole, because people, you will have discovered, Matt, that walking in to see estate agents, that when you first go in to see whoever is making that first contact, the chances are they've probably had 2 on the same day already.
Yep.
They've got a succession
Yep.
at 15-minute intervals
Yep.
of this. Now, that perhaps is dying out a little bit because a lot of the niches have been not filled. That's completely the wrong word. But I come back to this thing we talked about earlier, which is the ability to be able to offer a suite, a horrible word, to offer a number of solutions that fill the gaps that they know buyers are going to need. Yours is a very, very obvious one because it helps a seller, it helps a buyer, and it helps the agent. And you mentioned just now that there are a number of groups that are coming together trying to offer the best in class, to try and save the estate agents the trouble of knowing which is which and which works. And of course, that's one of the major problems that agents have, is that, number one, they're being squeezed. There are more and more there, even though we're told the number of estate agent branches are closing. Actually, for most people in areas, their competition seems to be increasing, particularly in London. And, of course, the slice of the pies are getting smaller and smaller and smaller because there's more and more people chasing less and less and less information. So, actually, the margins are being squeezed to hell. So, for people to spend money, your business model is just a simple pay-as-you-go, that people pay for the information, or is it a subscription model? How does your system work? Yeah,
it's subscription-based. And it's interesting. You're talking about the disruption and this and that. Our whole thing is, look, this data can only help everybody.
It's about collaboration, which is completely the opposite sounding of disruption.
Yeah, exactly. And we are where we are now. And you mentioned like tree preservation orders earlier. That was one thing that was never in my initial scope for the platform. But an agent said to me one day, I've had a look at what you do. It'd be really handy if you could put TPOs on there, because quite often that will either prevent somebody coming forward with an offer because they're automatically assuming big tree in the back garden, there'll be an order on that, or the flip side, they'll assume there's nothing wrong, and then late on the conveyancing process, they find that out. That's going to disrupt their plans for their extension or conservatory on the back, and then the sale falls apart. So we have listened to agents we first took our beta product out in early 17 and just listened and said, look, we've done this because we think this is a good thing and we think you might use it like this, but what do you think? And only from kind of listening and having that sort of real sort of co-creation with them are we sort of where we are today.
So you've been listening. You've been in a listening exercise as much as anything else. I mean, obviously, one of the things that does seem to be changing quite quickly, and this may or may not play into what you're doing, is that investors are increasingly becoming sort of self-managing with their investments, and I mean, that's another issue for estate agents to deal with. It's all about offering added value. And if you're not offering added value these days, there are so many things that a landlord or investor can do themselves. I mean, is yours mainly a B2B business at the moment, or do you feel there's a B2C element of it?
Yeah, we are very much looking at B2C next year. But at the moment, I would say we're B2B2C. So it's great that we've got all this data, but so what? So whenever the team come to me and say, we can now tell this, or we can now do this, or we can now do that, my first response is, and so what? And how are we giving that information? This is, having the data is only part of what we do. It's the tools and the features around that enable the agent to, say, present that to either a vendor to win the instruction and demonstrate they're the expert agent, or to demonstrate it for a buyer to get a more committed buyer. And with regard how we work with landlords and developers and letting agents on a B2B2C, we're finding that we're, if you like, a Trojan horse almost for certainly letting agents, because whilst they'd like to think that they probably know the landlord's complete portfolio, that might not be the case. And if they use us as almost a delivery method to say, okay, look, we've just rented your property for you, We've uploaded some of the documentation to the Sprift report for your property. It's a good place for you to engage because, as well as a great place to store information, we're also giving that live data feed to the landlord, so the landlord can see, what's going on in the planning arena in that area. He's not living in the property. Chances of the tenants passing on any neighbourhood consultation letters that come through are minimal. So we can let him know that, okay.
So is that part of the deal? I mean, is that sort of delivered as a weekly report?
Exactly, yeah.
So the subscription, so if you had a system where a lettings agent enabled their landlord to be able to see their Sprift report,
yes,
that would be a way of saying, just go along and this will tell you what's going on in your local area. Yeah, so it's almost a way of maintaining contact with that landlord.
Yes, yeah, we're it's very dynamic, it's very live. At the minimum, we would do according to the user's requirements, weekly or monthly planning alerts. So what's going on in the local vicinity planning wise, what's sold in that area, and we can break that down by which agents are selling. And then also we can say, based on what's happening in the area, here's what's happened to the value of your property. The price
yeah, I mean, I think the ability to see exactly what's going on in your locality. People are always, it is a peculiarly English thing. I think that people are always obsessed with property, and it's why businesses like yours, I think, are the right the right thing in the right time,
yes.
The right place.
Property porn is the term I keep hearing.
Yeah,
yes.
and I think it's. It will be fascinating to turn around. I don't know whether you've had any approaches from anybody in government. I mean, government claim that they're looking at tech solutions, and I've been a part of a couple of roundtables where they've said people have come in from the MHCLG, I think it's called now, isn't it?
Yes.
And sat down and said, what's available on the tech side and what can be done to help. But it doesn't strike me as there's a big reach from where you're at to the end product. I mean, there are some companies out there like Gazelle or whatever who are providing a legal solution, indeed in some new homes developments, I think it is now possible to buy on the button.
Yeah.
Because of course all the information is there because it's a new piece of land, etc., etc. And I just think it has to be a very, very small leap. I'm just not quite sure what it is that's going to turn the switch somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose one of the things that's been much maligned recently, I don't think all of it particularly deserved, has been this sort of change in the way people perceive the online agency, quote, online, unquote, agency sector. I mean, obviously last year there were several well-publicised problems. Have you had any engagement with the online community at all?
We have, and I think that.
Feel free to give your opinion, by the way. Please don't mince your words, Matt.
I think the parallel I can make, whilst being careful what I say, is that when I first sat down I can see parallels with the online agents' journeys to our journey, albeit on a different scale. Where when I first sat down and scoped out what Sprift was going to do, it was going to do absolutely everything. It was going to launch in 3 months' time. I'm now older and wiser in the tech industry to know that actually you'll be doing a very small part of that, but you'll do it very well if you're still around and in about 18 months' time. And I think a lot of the conversations we've had with the online guys, they're kind of still working out exactly what it is they're doing, how they're doing. They're as much a giant science experiment as kind of we are. Yeah, I think that's kind of that would be my.
I think that's a very interesting way. I think that's a very interesting way of putting it. Actually, it's why Connell's publicised that they bought Hatched, was they said we're going to do an experiment with it and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And for them it didn't work, which is why they closed it down. So I still think the whole thing's got legs. I think it's got some way to go, but it just strikes me that for pennies, I know that's not what you charge, but relatively for pennies, the ability for any agent, and particularly someone who is perhaps short on local expertise, which any of the online agents listening to me would probably accept some of the bigger ones, the ability to be able to deliver the sort of information you've got, you would have thought would be a complete no-brainer because people are going to have all the information at their fingertips.
Exactly that. And that sort of cuts both ways because when we very first were taking Sprift out to the high street agents, there was an element of, well, hang on a minute, I'm here, I'm the local agent, I'm the local expert, I know all this stuff. And So we would suggest that, okay, well, but how are you? Let us help you demonstrate that to your
present
vendor.
it better, because it's difficult to know how to do that.
And yes, exactly. The online guys, to a certain degree, I know they have local property experts, but to a certain degree, yes, they don't have that local expertise. So the ones that we are working with, that's exactly what they want. It's just either just very quickly, can I understand, or somebody's talking to me today about a property and it's completely off my patch. How do I immediately assess that and just get that insight into property? And that's where they would they'd look at us.
To me, it seems like a no-brainer. Which is why I'm talking to you.
I'm
only interested in talking to people who I think have interesting propositions or interesting ideas. Equally, I know how hard it is to go from 0 to 60 in doing these things. It's very difficult, having been going through that journey myself, which is how we came across each other.
Yeah, I don't think either of us used to have any grey hair, do we? But,
well, I've got considerably more than you. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I think you're a straight-up guy who sort of says exactly what you think. And I think these days in the agency business, I think that estate agency, part of the issue, it's not a problem, but part of the issue with estate agency is that probably 10 to 20% of the estate agency industry is reactive, actively looking for solutions and looking to engage with tech in some way or another. 80% of the industry, 75-80%, is 1 to 3 office operations who are very often don't have any form of succession in lines in plans. So it'll be owned by probably someone like me, a middle-aged guy who's owned it for sort of 20 years. His kids don't want to get involved. He can't really sell it unless he's got a big lettings book. So it's not surprising that the majority of the industry is really struggling with knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And I think they're fed up with having a succession of people walking through the door saying, this is great. That would be lovely to have. But, what are you going to charge me? 250 quid a month. Forget it, mate. There's the door.
Yeah, quite.
And I think something that is relatively cheap but pulls... I mean, I'm in awe of how the hell you start getting together stuff which pulls the amount of data that Sprift pulls out of the ether that puts on a page. I think that's fantastic. And to most people who are involved in data and property, that has got to be the holy grail. Have as much information in one place as possible. And if, as you say, if you have the right local authority, you're getting as much as 90% of the data that would enable a search, and a passport that has stuff that the owner has put into the property into their vault, which answers the questions that a solicitor would ask as part of those preliminary inquiries. You're a long way to sorting out the issues. So I really hope that not only a few agents who are listening to this think, well, actually, let's engage with that, because it's going to speed up the process, which is what we all want. What would be even better would be if there was someone from government listening who thought, oh, yes, maybe we should go down that route and talk to this guy. And it sounds to me like, Matt, like you went in to help. You go in and help some of the local authorities. It would be great if one could go in and talk to government and try and educate them and get one person in place long enough. I'd like to say thank you very much for coming in.
No, thank you.
If anybody wants to go to Sprift, Sprift is sprift.com.
Exactly. It's Smarter Property Information Technology is where it came from, but sprift.com. And
Smarter Property Information
Technology. We're trying to find a name that had property in it. Prop this, prop that was just I just got fed up with that. So
took a
bit of a 180
it's memorable.
That.
So Matt, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming in to talk.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Really appreciate that.